Welcome. So this is Caitlin Bachland here at Great Plains Institute. We are kicking off our 5th webinar for Cities Charging Ahead, and hopefully you can all see our screen. If you can't, please let us know either in the chat or Q&A function, just so we know that you don't have access to it. Otherwise, we will assume that you are seeing our slides. So we're going to kind of go into, oh goodness, there we go. So today's webinar is going to cover the following topics, primarily focused on ride and drives. And we have several guest speakers with us today, Drew Larson and Chris Lukenbill coming from Rochester, Phil Kirkegaard from Connexus Energy, and Jukka Kukkonen from PlugInConnect. So they will be talking to you momentarily. But first, just wanted to start off with kind of a background of Cities Charging Ahead. So we've been doing this for about a year now, and we've received some gracious funding from the Energy Foundation, Carillon Foundation, and Excel Energy. And additionally, we have received past support from the Minnesota Department of Commerce. So just keep that in mind as kind of a background of Cities Charging Ahead. So first, we wanted to start off just by giving you a brief introduction of what is a ride and drive. You've probably heard this tossed around a few times. You may not have ever attended one, but hopefully you have. And so this type of event really gives people the experience to test drive an electric vehicle in a low pressure setting. So it takes them off of the dealership lot, and so they're not pressured to actually purchase an electric vehicle, but they're still getting the valuable information from both sales associates and EV owners and other experts. It also gives attendees the opportunity to ask real questions to EV owners. So it's a great opportunity for them to talk to people who are actually practicing driving these vehicles. And in most cases, it is also combined with an EV 101 presentation, but it doesn't have to. So these events are very flexible, and they can encompass a lot of different types of events to make it a success for you. There are also two main types of a ride and drive. There's an employee event and also community type of event. So employee ones are ones where they're hosted by the employer, and it's tailored specifically to the employees. So it can either take on more of a employee benefit perspective, or if employers are looking to purchase vehicles for their fleet, it can also have those elements. Community events, of course, are tailored more toward the general public. So those ones are going to be a little bit more simplistic in nature in terms of the information that is being offered. Of course, you might be wondering, why should I do a ride and drive? It offers a lot of benefits, both to the attendees and also to the people that are hosting them. So, for example, it does help attendees overcome lack of experience in driving vehicles. It increases their comfort level, and of course, more butts and seats also increases adoption, which is what we all want. As I mentioned before, it's in a low pressure setting, so it's away from the dealership. And it also just helps people become a little bit more familiar with electric vehicles by providing general education. Lastly, it sends a signal to your community that you care about electric vehicles and sustainability. So at this time, I'd like to turn things over to Drew Larson with Rochester Public Utilities. And Drew, I'm wondering, it might be easier for me to just click through your slides if that's okay. And I think you can unmute yourself now.
Okay, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm Drew Larson with Rochester Public Utilities, and we also have
Chris Lukenbill here. I'm with Move Electric, a meetup group about electric vehicles and electric vehicle transportation.
So kind of talk about our experience with our ride and drive events. We held probably our second annual, but the first on our complete own ride and drive. You can probably move to the next slide there, Caitlin. But we had our first on our own ride and drive just a couple weeks ago. So kind of talk a little bit about that. We just have to move our slides around here, Caitlin, so I apologize. We can see our notes. So it was held in conjunction with our EarthFest Expo. We had a week-long event planned by a bunch of volunteers for EarthFest Week, and it kind of culminated into an event on Saturday with the EarthFest Expo. So we thought it was a good opportunity to have a ride and drive that day, and we had quite a few participants from dealers. We had a Nissan Leaf, Chevy Bolt, Toyota Prius Prime, a Honda Clarity, and a Chrysler Pacifica plug-in. And then we had multiple personal vehicles as well. In fact, we had a Tesla Model 3 that someone was willing to give ride and drives with. So we had that available as well. Unfortunately, we had probably some of the worst weather possible for a ride and drive event. We had a winter weather advisory put out the night before, and we had snowflakes the size of dinner plates coming down on us. So we were wondering what was going to happen with that. All the dealers showed up, and we offered them, you know, we could say we could do this in another time if you guys don't feel comfortable. They were gracious enough to all stay throughout the day. Next slide, please.
So yeah, we're going to get into a little bit of lessons learned from what we came out of that. So the first thing with the staging area side of things, we had a little bit of a broken up event of where we were at versus where the vehicles were at. And that's a little bit due to the logistics of the facility that we were at in doing it in coordination with the EarthFest Expo. All of the people were coming into the EarthFest Expo in the entry that was maybe, I don't know, 100 yards away from where we were set up with our ride and drive portion of it. And so what that forced us to do a little bit of a two-stage staging, which helped in some ways, hurt in others. The one thing there is we wanted to make sure that we had a good awareness of the event happening. And so with the people that were at the front of the event where people were coming in, we were able to answer some of their questions and let them know about the EVs and let them know about the ride and drive that was happening. And so that was a little bit of our staging to one degree. And then we also had the staging that was out where the vehicles were. And that's where with the vehicles were also the dealers out there. And that kind of brings up the second point there as far as lessons learned. The dealerships, you know, this is something that's known to the EV community fairly readily, that dealerships don't necessarily understand the vehicles that they're selling from the EV side of things. It just doesn't make up as much of their market right now. And so there's still a lot of unknowns for them. And so this is something that even Drew brought up, that there was dealerships that didn't even know about the $75, at least sales individuals that were there from the dealerships that didn't know about the $7,500 tax incentive from the federal side of things. And so those are some fairly big issues, especially from a sales perspective. But it's the lesson learned from that is just to make sure that you have somebody who understands electric vehicles. Definitely have some of the owners out there, if possible, that can constantly be working that staging area, even out there where the vehicles are. Ideally, you have really good signage or an event that has people going by it already, so you can have everybody in one area. But then also the next item there on top of it is when you have people coming through, just make sure that you have a smaller amount of time that you're bringing people through. That's both from the dealerships, the dealers being able to feel like they're getting value out of this of being there, but even just from the people that you have that are volunteering to be part of this, from the EV owners, just to be able to get a good amount of density of people there in a short amount of time, not spread over too much time. And then to be able to handle that, the last item there is to be able to create a sign-up list, something that you can get people slotted in for when they'd be able to do some drives, because that's something that you're going to have people excited about being able to experience this. And not only the education of it, the education is a huge component of this for sure, but being able to get them to experience driving an electric vehicle, whether it's a Nissan Leaf, a Tesla Model S, like all of those things are unique. Even if it's not a Tesla, which is the, of course, the sports car, that even if it's just a Nissan Leaf, which is very much a small vehicle, that it's very unique to what people are experiencing driving a standard ICE vehicle. And so being able to give them that experience is something that you want to be able to slot in the times there to get everybody signed up for it. Next slide, please.
So on the next slide, we continue with a little bit more on signage. Since we were a little bit disconnected from the event and we were supposed to have more things happening around us, we didn't have the signage available because things were supposed to happen around us. Weather didn't cooperate. So what we're looking at doing next time, obviously, is creating more signage, big banners, whatnot, to get the organic traffic coming in. Next time, we would like to have someone available the entire time that's a non-dealer. And what they can do is they can manage the queue. They can provide information for EVs and plug-in hybrids for those that might not know about it. Again, as Chris pointed out, some of the sales folks there weren't that up on their vehicles, and we were educating them more than they were. And then runners for last minute requests. In our case, it was hot chocolate and warmers, little hand warmers. And then we want to be able to provide the route information to the drivers and any other pamphlets or whatever we can hand out. And we want to provide a central sign-up location. Again, with that sign-up genius or with some type of online, you can have initial time slots for everybody, but getting everybody through that first to kind of find out what they need, I think would really add some value.
Next slide. Perfect, thank you. All right, the how Rochester benefited from this, we can both speak on this for sure, but the community awareness side of things, that's a big piece, is just letting people know that this is an option. We were speaking at the EarthFest Expo to a lot of people that are very environmentally inclined. They're the people that will probably be more interested in electric vehicles, at least from that aspect of it. But even they didn't know about a large majority of the vehicles that were out there and available. And that's something that actually Jukka, another individual who's on this call here, he provides a great list of all of the vehicles that are available in the Midwest. We had that available for everybody to be able to review. And that's something that just helps to be able to, again, raise that awareness of what's out there, what's possible. And then along with that, busting the myths that are out there. There's a lot of misinformation that's out there, and just old information, stuff that just doesn't apply anymore, that maybe was applicable 20 years ago, but it still resonates with people now. And so some of the items on that is charging. The big outside perception is that with a lack of public charging infrastructure, you're not going to be able to drive your vehicle around from day to day. And the reality of that, right, is anybody that owns an electric vehicle, is they start with a full tank of gas pretty much every day because they just plug in their garage. Addition to that is the cost. Everybody sees the numbers coming through for Teslas. They don't understand that there's an entire range of vehicles for EVs, and the economics of buying an electric vehicle, especially a used electric vehicle, can be very enticing for people. And then finally, one of the other items that I mentioned there as far as myth is that the battery lifespan, that's something that I got questions over and over again about, well, yeah, there's reduced maintenance costs, they can understand that, but doesn't the battery die out in 2 or 3 years' time? And so being able to go over some of those details with people was a really great experience to be able to provide that information from an owner's perspective. Again, that's not information that the dealers are really going to have available, or they're not going to know that information if they're not excited about electric vehicles and learning on their own. So being able to bust some of those myths is a great opportunity.
So another thing that built onto building awareness is when people drive through town, they're not aware of, hey, that's an EV, that's a plug-in hybrid. So bringing these vehicles in one central location and saying, hey, this is a plug-in hybrid, this is an EV, they're like, oh, I had no idea. So the next time they're driving through their community, all of a sudden they're aware that there is a lot more out there than they thought there were. And they don't have to look like some environmentalist, Prius, the whole stigma behind having a green car. I can have a Ford Fusion plug-in hybrid that looks like just any other Ford Fusion on the road, and save a lot of money and have the economics behind having an EV. Mm-hmm. So one of the other things too, the next bullet point is relationship builder. We really built some relationships with a lot of these dealerships. We worked hard at that, going in and visiting with them. It was fantastic. Also between the city and us as the utility, the whole community, it gets the conversation going, opens that up. What do you need? What do we need? Which isn't always in open communication. And then we're helping promote Rochester's sustainability goals. We do have goals for CO2 reduction that the city has set forth. Much of our CO2 comes from our transportation sector, and it's probably the thing we have least control over. So getting out and promoting this is really helping on that aspect.
All right, so planning for the future one. The ideas that we were able to come out of from this, we kind of covered in the first part here as far as the type of event that we were a part of with the EarthFest Expo, and the good and the, what worked out and what didn't work out from that, taking some of those lessons going forward. Some real quick items that are real easy opportunities that we have here in Rochester that works out well for that is we have a very active farmers market. Again, and you have so as far as possible future locations that will hold it, the farmers market makes sense from the similar type of community of environmentally focused individuals that would be interested in electric vehicles from that perspective. We have the fair here in town. We have our county fair, which is a great opportunity to be able to get an amazing subset of individuals from our community that spans the entire spectrum. In addition to, we have some other community events that go along with this. We have a Thursdays on First event that happens throughout the summer, another great way to bring in people from all over and be able to show them the opportunities here, in addition to other Arbor Day, Earth Day type of events in the future.
So one of the other things, we're going to approach the dealers again as new vehicles are coming out. Everybody's seeing, Ford Escape's going to have a new plug-in hybrid next year, all these things. So keeping in constant contact with those dealers and keeping that communication open is really going to be a significant thing for the next few years. And then we had charge points available there but we would like to have more EV charging distributors, through your local electrical suppliers and things like that. They're selling the Schneider Electrics, the charge points, do they have something available to show? And then we have to obviously create a new route per the location. We're trying to get it short enough for multiple drives, but we want it varied enough. We had a great route where we were at RCTC. They could get up to speed up to about 55 miles an hour. And then they had some shorter, slower speed ones where they could test the handling and braking and things like that. But you also want to make it sure that you have it safe for easy pull in and out. You want to avoid those backup scenarios.
All right, so then, marketing for the next time. This is a big part of it, is getting the word out ahead of time. So again, with our first one, we were kind of piggybacking on the EarthFest Expo and pulling in the people that were going to that. We did put out some information out ahead of time, and this is kind of going down to the second bullet point there as far as social media. We are using both our meetup group that we have, our EV club that talks about electric vehicles. We distributed out to that group. That really helped to bring in all the volunteers. But then we also put the information out there on the electric vehicle Facebook groups that, again, helped again bring even more volunteers in. The Twin Cities has a really great community that loves to travel out and tell more about it, especially the Tesla groups. The Tesla groups are definitely the groups that are really big proponents of sharing their experience with everybody. And so that's a great resource to be sure that you take advantage of. But then getting that social media out there to the people that would potentially want to come in and experience these and drive these, that's another thing. Both through social media, get it out there, create events on Facebook for it, and then even community education through different whatever publications you have in your community to be able to tell people about it, whether it's the newspapers or local magazines. That can be a great resource for reaching a good subset of your individuals. Yeah, so we had the flyers there, and then the EV car show is the other portion of it that we didn't really get into as much with this one. Again, with the weather not being, we had some vehicles there that we had to be able to show off more than just what we could ride and drive in. But there wasn't really a whole lot of milling around in the weather that we had. But I know there's even some people over in the Casson area that are looking to do an EV section of a regular car show that they're having over there in Casson. So that's something that, the car show side of things, just to be able to, again, raise awareness of what vehicles are out there, what they look like, just to show the broad range of what electric vehicles from plug-in hybrids to fully electric look like out there. And that'll be something that'll be more and more interesting as more models come out in this year and the following. So definitely something to continue to think about.
So that kind of summarizes our experience and what we kind of learned from it. And thank you.
Great, thanks Drew and Chris. So at this time, we're gonna open it up for some questions. So you can either send us a question through the Q&A or through chat, and we'll answer them and it looks like Diana might want to talk. Okay, Diana, you should be unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Happy Wednesday. That was great, you guys. And I appreciate the collaboration between the city, the municipal utility, and the local resident group that are enthusiasts of EVs. You talked about how you were really trying to bust some of those myths out there. How did you do that? Did you have one point person that was talking to people and responding? Did you have at multiple people? Did you have talking points? Did you have a handout? Like, how did you deal with those myths?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that you mentioned there is yes, yes, and yes of what we did. We had multiple people there, different EV owners. Those are people from the club that are interested in electric vehicles. We're the individuals that are reading up on this and listening to podcasts as far as all of the information that's coming out. And so we're able to not only share our experience, but then also be able to talk a little bit about what's going on around the industry, because there was a lot of questions along battery technology. And those are things that, as a regular car owner, you're not really going to care about that. You just drive your vehicle, plug it in and go. But if you're really an enthusiast on it, you start digging into some of those details. So some of us knew that information. We were able to hand it off to others when we didn't know, and answer some questions that way. A lot of the baseline questions, the myth busting type of things, that's again that handout that we had. Jukka Kukkonen is probably going to mention it in his portion too, as far as the resources that he has out there and available. He's a great resource that this state has to be able to help share information about electric vehicles. He has an entire printout, which is a beautiful printout showing all of the vehicles that are available in the Midwest and all of the numbers around there. The numbers that go with it are something that is, I think, a very important thing to be able to show people ranges that are available, types of vehicles, whether they're plug-in hybrids or full battery electric, just to be able to explain some of those details that people don't necessarily understand unless they've gone out and really researched this because they're going to buy one themselves and are already down this path. This is something that really intros people into that information right away to be able to get that right away and have that available.
So, I mean, you obviously have the EV owners themselves that are busting these myths, but the main thing is for people to see these vehicles and drive them and kind of bust those myths themselves. It's important for them to get their butts in the seats and realize that Chevy Bolt is pretty quick. You know, that it's fun to drive. So I think there's a lot of these myths that it's only for the environmentalist. No, it's for the car enthusiast too. So a lot of these are addressed by the EV owners, but I think the real myth busting gets when they get in the car.
That's a good point.
So this is Diane again. I just want to do a shout out to a couple of, we do have a piece on the benefits of EVs that's on the Drive Electric Minnesota site. There's some of that information. We have handouts, but the Cities Charging Ahead effort has put together a 4-page document that has a bunch of kind of issues and addresses all of them in a really long form, but we're working on a shorter form that hopefully would be something that you could hand out to folks, because I think some things are, you know, you can drive it and realize it's fun and all those other things, but that doesn't tell you how long the battery's going to last, or you know, does it drive in cold weather if it's, you know, summer in June. So just want to let folks know that we have some resources and there's more coming.
So we have a question in from Ben Martin. He's wondering if there's been any discussion on alternative solutions to address the lack of knowledge at dealerships. And I think this is a topic that Jukka will cover as well. But I'm just curious, you know, Drew and Chris, are there anything that you guys are doing in Rochester to help educate dealerships in your area?
So hopefully Jukka is going to help us out with that, because we have tried to, but dealerships really don't. They're concentrated on selling their high volume vehicles, and they're not very receptive to a third party coming in for training to give them information. But we are referring them to a contact if they're not, you know, we're handing them our card and saying, if you have a customer that has questions that you're unable to answer, refer them to us. We can help them with the charging abilities and things like that. I'm hoping Jukka has some better points, because we haven't had a lot of success in that arena, just because EVs in this territory haven't been a high volume seller yet. And they're concerned about sales. So no, kind of.
Hello, this is Jukka Kukkonen here from PlugInConnect. I'll mention a couple of things about this definitely, yeah. So yeah, that continues to be a challenge for us before we start to see more EVs sold than internal combustion engines, because dealers will sell whatever they have on the lot right now, and they are very well versed in selling those, but these are new things, so we are not there yet. We have in Twin Cities, and some of them outside too, last year I trained 200 salespeople about selling EVs, so we have started to do some of it. And the basic idea is just trying to make their life as easy as possible in this area, so that the salespeople wouldn't have to think too much about it, and then they could just handle the car, and then the harder questions would go in the utility companies who can help it with that area. And that has been well received when we have been able to talk with dealers, but that's still a lot of education we have to do, all of us, in this space with other dealers in the long run.
Great. So if you have additional questions, we will have some time at the end for some more discussion. So at this time, I want to turn things over to Phil Kirkegaard with Connexus Energy. He is their small commercial and builder trade representative, and he's going to talk to you about kind of what Connexus Energy as a utility has been doing with ride and drive.
Well, good morning, everybody. I am Phil at Connexus. Connexus is the utility distribution, or the electrical utility distribution up in the northern part of the Twin Cities, the Blaine, Coon Rapids, Andover area. And obviously, as an electrical utility, we are very interested in what's going to happen with EVs. EVs represent a tremendous amount of load growth for us. They also present some challenges in terms of trying to manage the peak demands that could go onto our system if there's a lot of EVs out there. But certainly we are very active in promoting EVs and are doing what we can to educate the public. Really what we're doing right now is centers around awareness. If you want to go to the next slide. Okay. So we're trying to do ride and drives. We educate people on our website, through our social media. We talk about our rates. Obviously, people need to know how they can charge their vehicles, so we have specific time of use rates and EV charging rates and things. So we need to get that information out to people, not have that be a barrier for them to buy an EV. And there's just a lot of education going on through Connexus to our membership, as there are through all sorts of different avenues, EV owners, Jukka's efforts, so on and so forth. Oops, sorry. Next one. So in 2018, we did 13 ride and drive events. I was not involved in every one of them, but I was involved in most of them. They were some community events. They were some private corporate events, if you will, or company events. As you can see, there was Happy Days in Ramsey. That was a large community event. That's their big yearly carnival, if you will. And at Happy Days, they have a classic car show, and they invited us to come over and have an EV portion to it. And we've been doing that the last 3 years. We had a ride and drive at Coon Rapids. So that was a city event where that was part of their fleet karma study, and we did a ride and drive there for their employees, if you will, as well as we were at YMCA's and other individual companies like US Distilled. At the YMCA, we partnered with their adult group, or they have some sort of an adult group that they focus on there for their wellness, and most of those are retirees, but they're very willing to show up and come and see what EVs are all about because they've got time on their hands, so that's kind of interesting. Next slide, please. So, you know, what is kind of the formula for starting a ride and drive? I think number one, you want to have a good route that you can do. And Drew and Chris mentioned this also. It needs to be long enough so that people can get a little feel for the vehicle. At the same time, you don't want it so long that the vehicle is out for, you know, an hour at a time or whatever. But you want to establish ahead of time what would be a good route. This was an example on the right-hand side of a route that's around our campus facility there. Some other things you want to know is if you're going to involve dealerships, definitely know their rules. For example, Main Motors is a Chevy dealership right near us, and we wanted them to provide a bolt for one of our events, but they didn't have a bolt, and another dealership did. But because the event was being held in Main Motors territory, that other dealership couldn't provide the bolt to us. So you want to definitely make sure what the rules are for the dealerships. I'm sure they vary by company, but know that. Know what the insurance requirements are. Is the dealership going to take on the insurance requirements? Is the sponsorship of the event going to take on the insurance requirements? So definitely get to know what those requirements are. Not all dealerships deal with EVs. Maybe Jukka could speak to this, but I believe if they don't have the service department to work on an EV, they can't sell it, can they?
They can't sell new ones. They can't sell used.
Yes, they can't sell new ones. So that means that some of the dealerships literally don't have EVs available. And we found that oftentimes that the sales manager, or sometimes maybe they have a kind of a dedicated salesperson for their EV fleet. You definitely want to build relationships with them. They will help you get vehicles to your event. Another key thing, and Drew and Chris also mentioned that, is to get your EV owner groups involved in your events when possible. This obviously wouldn't, well, this really pertains to both community and private events. The EV owners are the most enthusiastic disciples of EV ownership that there are out partnered with them on almost all of our events, and they do a fabulous job. They love to come and talk about their EVs. If you're doing a ride and drive, it is probably a good idea if there's a venue where you can have a little bit of an educational presentation. You can talk about the history of the vehicles, talk about pros and cons of EVs, if you will. You know, a lot of people don't know that 80% of charging happens at homes. They think they have to have outside community EV charging stations, and that really isn't typically a barrier for having an EV, since most of the charging happens at home. You know, if you can invite some outside speakers who are experts, whether they're maybe somebody from a dealership or just somebody within Plug-in Minnesota that is an absolute expert at it, that is great. People are very thirsty for knowledge about EVs. Here again, on the lower right, that's a picture of this retiree group at the YMCA. And if you can provide some food for them too, that always brings a few more people in if your budget allows that. Okay. Here's an example of Jukka's little chart that shows different types of vehicles. This is the type of information in a handout form that is really good to have at an event. I'm sure Jukka's probably got a newer version of it than this, and it's going to be interesting. I'd read that GM is going to come out with 20 all-electric cars by 2023. So when you look at the amount of new vehicles that are going to be on the road in the next 5 years or so, I think we're going to finally start to see that chicken and egg thing where people don't want to buy an EV because there's not a lot of EVs to choose from, and the dealers or the manufacturers don't want to make them because there's no demand for them. You know, it's always that chicken and egg, but I think it seems like maybe that pendulum is going to turn a little bit with a lot more vehicles coming out onto the market in the very near future. So here again, we were talking a little bit about some education at these events. You know, a lot of people don't know that some of the earliest vehicles were electric cars. The one on the upper right there, that was an electric vehicle. You can always get a little bit of a quizzical look from your attendees if you say, anybody that buys an EV after attending this, that we will pay for all of the oil changes in that EV for the life of that car. And you get some people that chuckle and get it, and you get some people going, well, how can they possibly afford to pay for all those oil changes? So, you know, it's interesting to gauge the knowledge level of your audience, if you will. This event for the retirees, if you will, that adult group, the average age was 69. And you think, well, EVs, you know, that's kind of a new technology. Would they want that? And then you think about retirees. Their driving habits are really good for an EV. They're typically not going long distances. They're taking their little commuter runs back and forth to the store and the bank. Some of them definitely have some disposable income at you know, available. So I don't know, I think some retirees are good candidates. This slide was an example of a corporate event, if you will. We had a Chrysler Pacifica there. That was on the lower left-hand side. The dealer provided that. You notice that Daikin does have some charging stations already in place at the lower right there, so that this is a corporation that is actively promoting EVs for their employees. Those are the perfect opportunities to get some ride and drives and get their employees familiar with the different vehicles out there. Here again, we partnered with a vehicle owners association. They brought some of their vehicles on the upper right, as well as Lisa Thurston with the Minnesota Lung Association helped us out with that event. I was not there, so I can't speak to that specifically. Then there's, up in Ramsey near our location, there's a game fair. It's all about hunting, bird hunting, deer hunting, so on and so forth, that gets thousands of people to this large kind of outdoor event area. And so for that event, we rented a Tesla as kind of eye candy to get people to come in and talk to us. And it did do that. We talked to over 600 people there. We also had some other EVs there. There was a Bolt up in that red car there, that was a Bolt. And so we had a couple of EVs to talk about. And you would think that, you know, it's kind of the hunting, fishing group, the pickup crowd, if you will. I would love to have an electric pickup there as soon as possible. That would really get their attention, but we really did get a lot of people coming in, asking questions. There again, the Tesla is always a draw. And we had some Volvos on display and things there also. We did not have any test drives at that event. And that's one thing I was going to mention. It's kind of interesting. It seems like if it's a community type of an event where it's not specifically a ride drive, people are there, you know, because of all sorts of other activities that are going on, and they happen to walk by and they see that you have an EV there and possibly a ride drive. It is extremely difficult to get them to get into the seats or to drive it. They'll sit in the car, but they don't want to drive it. I don't know why that is. So if you've got an event like that where you're literally, you know, like an Earth Day event or something where maybe they're not there specifically for the EVs, you want to have somebody out front that's a good salesperson and good at getting people in the vehicle and convincing them that they should take a ride, because people are reluctant to take rides in that situation. I don't know why. I think it's a good opportunity, you know, it's free, but they are very reluctant. That's been our experience. So this is Ramsey Happy Days. We started doing this event 3 years ago. It was the first ride and drive event, the first EV event we did. We've done it 3 years now, and every year it's been sunny and blue skies, so that's helped. We get 75 to 100 people that we talk to there. This is in conjunction with the Classic Car Show. So the Classic Car Show is lined up on one street, and then the EVs are lined up on the other. We've relied very heavily on their EV owners group again to bring their vehicles here. They've been very gracious in terms of doing that. And it's just amazing how they will engage people talking about their vehicles, letting them sit in their vehicles, in some cases letting them drive their vehicles. We did have some dealerships there too over the last several years. This car in the middle on the right-hand side, I believe that's an i8 BMW that got a lot of people's attention. I think it only has about 8 miles of electric range, so it's really not much of an EV per se, but it's always good to have something that gets people's attention, and that vehicle certainly did. We will, I think, be participating in Happy Days again this year. Ramsey really likes having us there. It is literally a mile from our offices, so it's a good location for us. And we've had very good success there, just bringing out awareness again and talking about our rates and trying to bust those myths about that it's too complicated to have an EV. Just last weekend, we had another EV event at Northtown Mall. We've done this the last couple of years. It's a static show inside the mall, as well as a ride and drive outside. They have these courtyards, if you will, where they can park the cars. This year, we had 7 dealers bring cars there. A Kia, a Prius Prime, a Mitsubishi Outlander, a Chevy Bolt, a Nissan Leaf, a Tesla 3, and a Volvo SUV. And then for the ride and drive, we had a Bolt, a Leaf, and an Outlander. And that was very successful. You can see we've got signage throughout the mall. The mall really likes having this event there. It goes over the weekend. The cars inside the mall, they're not staffed or anything, or maybe one dealer was there. That's possible, but they're just kind of sitting there. There again, it's awareness. People look at them, they go, well, that looks like all the other vehicles, but it's an EV. So back to that conversation about that, they just look like the other vehicles that are on the road, and people are now a little bit more aware of that as they're driving down the highway, the car next to them is an EV. The ride and drive was, I think, put on by the Lung Association again, and they do a real nice job of getting people out and riding and driving in those vehicles, and I think we had pretty good participation there. Last year at Connexus, we added about 55 electric vehicles that we know of that have specific charging rates associated with them. There may be additional people that are just literally plugging into their wall outlet, but we anticipate probably another 60 or 70 vehicles being added into our service territory this year. And this last picture, that's me. That was the first time I got to drive a Tesla S. That was about 3 years ago, and it changed my perception of an EV forever. It was the most fun vehicle I've ever driven in my life, and that's the key, is to get butts in the seats and let people drive an EV, whether it's a Leaf or a Bolt. I've driven several Leafs that I thought were a blast to drive. It doesn't have to be a $140,000 Model S, and that's just the key with these ride and drives. It's the awareness and getting people familiar with the vehicles.
All right, any questions for Phil? All right, it doesn't look like we're getting any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and move on. And if you do think of any, again, we will have time at the end to address those. So now I'd like to turn things over to Jukka Kukkonen. He is the founder of PlugInConnect, and he also coordinates the Minnesota EV Owners Circle. So he'll be talking to us about both how to engage dealers and also how to engage EV owners for these types of events.
Well, thank you, Caitlin, and thank you for having me here today to talk with you about this topic. Truthfully, I think most of my stuff that I'm going to be talking with you have already been covered by other panelists here, so that's good. That's always an easy situation to be in, so don't have to think about that too much. But I'll talk a little bit more about some of the perspectives from working with EV owners and and the other dealers that might have not been mentioned, or emphasize some of the things that previous panelists have already mentioned here. So we have the Minnesota EV Owners Group, that has been previously called Minnesota Plug-in Vehicle Owners Circle, so you see still that name sometimes pop up there, so I just wanted to tell that that's exactly the same thing, even though the name has just changed. But we've had the group since 2012, we started that time. Now we have 1,500 members in our group, and we're one of the biggest and most active groups in the US. We have been participating or organizing these events since 2012, and I can't say that we have done dozens, because we have now done hundreds of them So many of our members are well experienced in these events. And it's funny how easily people will learn how to do these events. It's not that hard, and that's the idea, is to just keep it very, very simple. So for you, whatever events you're doing, definitely try to engage your local owners, EV owners, for those events. It's much better if they are right there from your organization or from your local area. Makes it easier for them and makes it easier for you. And then if you're talking with your neighbor, it's just easier to listen to them and believe what they are saying about their experience. So that's the thing. So for you also, I mean, it's one thing to organize an event and post it into the general EV owners group like ours, and just ask for members to come there, and that's great. We should definitely do that. But I would also encourage you to just engage all your local EV owners and start to kind of put together a list of people who in your area who own EVs, so that you can work directly with them, and it might make it much easier to set up some of these events in the future. So think about I'm talking mostly now with this one about EV display, because again, I'm jumping back there. So what we do with EV owners, we set up static displays. I don't recommend using EV owners to do the ride and drive portions, because there's the liability issues. If they want to sometimes do it themselves, fine, but if they're part of some of the organized event, you as an organizer have some kind of a liability risk there. And therefore, I'm always said to our owners that we just set up the display, and if we want to have a ride and drive, then we engage the auto dealers for that, because that also gives them a good, clear role there. So think about if you think about now, the simplest way to set up this is just to reserve spots in your parking lot right by the whatever event you have, and figure out the way would you put the EVs to display. Consider that location well. As we already heard from Rochester experience, they were kind of struggling a little bit because of the physical limitations of their last event. And we've had it happen sometimes when we go into the event site, and there might be an inside event and this is EV display is part of it, and people are going through one door to that event, but our display might be originally put like, it doesn't have to be more than 50 feet away on a parking lot. Truth is, display gets very little attention at that point. It really has to be on the path where people are walking into that event. So you get the foot traffic there, and you get an opportunity to just kind of like say people, hey, here we have the electric cars on display. You want to check this out, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to help you. So just making it really, really easy, and making sure that people will notice the display and have an opportunity to engage with the owners there. Think about the right number of cars and volunteers. When you're setting up an event, think about what kind of foot traffic you're expecting to that, and how many people you would like to be there. And be specific about it. If it's a small event, I normally say 2 to 3 cars is enough. It doesn't make sense for us to have a dozen volunteers in an event where we expect 50 people to show up. It's much better to just kind of like put the right number of cars and volunteers to the event, because we want to make sure that we are not overly burning our volunteer base with requests that don't answer. But if you have a big event, usually like 2 to 3 cars is already a good display. 5, 6 cars is actually excellent display. So that's already pretty much everything you need for almost any event in that way. So if more show up, great for a big event, but I would definitely be clear with what you would like to see at the event. Also keep it light, keep it really, really simple. In a simplest form, I say always to our group is that the only thing we need is a couple of parking spots where we just show up with our cars, hop off the car and start talking with people. When the event is over, we'll just hop back on the car, drive away. That's how simple it can be, and that's how simple it should be for your volunteers, so they don't have to think about it too much. Also, don't request them to come like half an hour before or an hour before. I've had events where event organizers have said, well, could you come here an hour before? We want to make sure that we set up. And I'm saying, unfortunately, I can't request that from our owners. It's enough if they show up there 15 minutes before, because they practically just have to park their car and step out and they are ready. So let's not burn their time on this, because they are just volunteers. So keeping it simple for them is important. Providing a map, that's very, very useful. People coming into the event, it's excellent if you can provide them a map, and there was already a couple of maps shown in the previous slides there, and just to show a map, just take a capture of Google Earth or something like that, that you can see the area there, mark there where are you going to have the cars, where you're going to have the display, and then share that with the people who are coming to the event. So that way they know where to come, where to park, no hassle. It's very, very simple. And then you are on the same page as the volunteers that are coming into the event. It's a little hard if you haven't one idea of where the car should be going, and the people coming there say, well, maybe we should be there instead of here, and it just gets a little bit complicated very easily. But that makes sure that everybody's on the same page and it's easy for everyone. They can easily find where they are. Also here, I would say use some kind of a, we already heard in Rochester experience, especially, that use some kind of a way that people will notice that there's actually a display here. Use banners or flags or something like that, so that people understand that these cars are not just parked here, but they are doing some kind of display here. And truthfully, I don't even care what the banners say, as long as there's banners, so or flags. So that's the interesting, I mean, important part of this one. We already covered the static display, so I don't talk too much about that one. But EV owners are there to provide real-life information. We mentioned already earlier, if you want to do some kind of a presentation as part of it, having EV owners is easiest way to do it. Practically, if you just want to have a small panel, 3 to 4 EV owners. We've done this for years. For example, at the State Fair in August, and I moderate the panel, but basically I just open up and say, hey, there are great cars in Minnesota, EVs available, and here we have panelists just telling you how they drive and what is it like to own and charge an electric car here in Minnesota, and that's about it. Then panelists will start telling their experiences, and from there on, people will ask the questions, and that is actually very, very good system to do that. So real life information, that's what we try to share there. And then use some kind of handouts as discussion tools. We've already seen some of that. We use a lot of that. EVs available in Minnesota list, and I'll provide you a link where you can download the latest version of that one always. So that's an easy discussion tool for people to talk about it, because even if they're not too interested about electric cars, they're like, okay, well, that's interesting. They don't even know what the questions are. You hand them that and say, here's a list of all the electric cars that are available in Minnesota. They start to look at that and say, oh, I didn't know that there are this many. Huh, okay. Oh, Honda is providing one too. What do you know about that one? And that's where the discussion goes. It's just some kind of discussions. Then working with other dealers. Again, we've heard already a couple of perspectives to this one, and that's great. The same deal with other dealers is that consider how many cars do you need and how do you wanna do this. Other dealers are there not to educate people. They are there to provide test drives and get potential leads that they can follow up after that. If they are very good, they can actually do some education, but mostly they are there just to provide the test drive. So don't expect them to necessarily be the most educated as we've heard from this one. But the good thing is that when they come to these events, they actually learn more at the same time. So it is good educational event for them too, oftentimes. So it provides a good value from that perspective. But we have to be very cautious also in again, not overusing other dealers in any of these events. If you have an event, make sure that you have enough foot traffic that it makes sense for the other dealers to be there. We already heard from Rochester that make sure that you have a short enough time where you think that you have the best attendance, so that there's a dense population there, so they know that they will get the test drives. And also make sure that when you're organizing the event, when you're there, you are driving people to do the test drives. So Bill already mentioned how that can be sometimes hard. So people have to just kind of encourage people that, hey, here you can see the car, go test drive that one, go test drive something, whatever they are interested in. For example, we were at the Blaine event, and when we started that event, they hadn't opened up the mall yet, so there was very few people there. I encouraged our own EV owners to go and test drive the models that they hadn't test driven. And I went to test drive myself the new Nissan Leaf Plus, that is the new with the bigger battery and actually more power. And I was like, wow, this actually has a lot of pickup now. It was very. Someone said that the Leaf is not sporty, but boy, it is actually sporty right now with the new new setup, the Plus one. So check it out. So make sure that the dealers, when they arrive, they get some people driving the cars, because that's why they are there. The thing that also was mentioned already, you have to follow the sales territories. Truthfully, I would love to work with just a couple of dealers that I know always, for example, in Twin Cities area, that are doing a good job and are interested in providing this. But it depends on where your location, where your event is. You have to go first to talk to that other dealer, because they have the sales territories. And sales territories mean that other dealers have a first right of refusal, or they have to be first given the chance to show the new cars in their own sales territory. If someone from other dealership comes into their sales territory to do an event, be present there with new cars, they could sue that dealership. So we don't want to get into messy fights between the dealerships with this one. So just start with whoever is the closest to your event. Ask from the dealer, or work with the regional managers, if possible, from that manufacturer, to just check out what's the right dealer to talk with. And if they can't provide it, then see if we could get someone from other dealership at the event. But that's how we have to play this game. That's how it's set up. So that's a fact of life. I already mentioned that being mindful of their time. That's crucial. Communicate clearly. Again, providing them a map is a really, really good thing, so that they know where to go. And if you can already have a test drive route, that's even better for them. Saturdays and end of month are hard. If you're doing a Saturday, usually auto dealer salespeople, they want to be at the dealership in Saturdays, because that's the busiest day for them, and they can have most customers close most deals on that days. So it's sometimes really, really hard to get them Saturdays outside of their dealership. The same applies to the end of the month. I would say 5 days before the end of the month, don't even bother trying to get the other dealers at your event, because they have to meet their monthly sales quotas, and that's when they are calling through all their prospective clients and having negotiations and all of that stuff. So they are busy always at that time. Earlier part of the month is much easier in that way. So take that into account. And as I said, it's a learning opportunity for dealers too. So that's a good way, and it's a good way for us to engage with dealers, provide them value on this one. As long as we know that the event will actually have a good foot traffic. If we start to ask dealers to events and then we don't have anyone test driving the cars, they're like, why would I try to even sell these electric cars if I don't get anyone to drive them even at these events? So be mindful of that when you do it. That's just keeping that in mind. All right. We can go into Q&A. I just provided one list of links that we, for example, provide a quick link. So whatever handouts you do, just try to make them there easier to understand and use use good handouts. It's always good to have something there available. And the basic idea there is just to have them as a discussion tools with the customers, so that that's how they are used. Why we already mentioned the plug-in vehicle models list a couple of times. That's the link where you can find the latest models list. It was updated a week ago, so it should be pretty well up to date right now. But then there's other links that we use at these events. So feel free to use these or any other links, whatever you think that is valuable for you at the events. And sometimes these are also good when people are just asking questions about certain areas, that people have the links that they remember. Oh, someone asked like how clean the cars are. I always just pull my cell phone and just go to carboncounter.com and so, hey, here's a good graph that shows you what's the difference between driving internal combustion engine car or EV. It's an easy tool to use in those kind of situations, and people are impressed about it, and they say, okay, that's great. That covers but one myth that they might have had otherwise.
Great, thanks so much, Jukka. Really great information. Does anyone have any questions for Jukka on either engaging EV owners or dealerships for these types of events? Okay, Lise, you should be unmuted now. Hopefully. We can't hear you if you're talking. If you're able to, you might want to send your question in through chat since we aren't hearing you.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, super. All right. I just had to switch from the regular phone to the internet phone. Okay. So thank you, and thanks for your patience. So my main question is, how do you find EV owners in your community? You just put a shout out through the Minnesota EV owners group, or how do you do that?
Yeah, that's I would say one thing to do. The other thing is to definitely work with the utility company, because they have also a list of people who have done that, so they could potentially promote it to their EV owners, and then providing them just an email and say, if you're interested in coming there, just send me a note and let me know. And from there on, just start to gather the list, kind of start to gather a local EV owners list for yourself. That you can kind of reach out to, because if people are driving EV today, they'll be driving EV from a year from now and 2 years from now. So you're just starting to build the group there from there on.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jukka? All right, seeing none, I'm going to keep moving here. So next up, GPI has developed a ride and drive toolkit. And so as you've heard from our panelists today, there are a couple of different ways of doing these events. So you can work with your utility if they're comfortable helping to organize an event for you. There's a couple of other organizations with ride and drive experience. Midwest Evolve is a huge one in Minnesota, so they're definitely a great resource as well. But sometimes, you know, as more ride and drives start popping up, there's only so many people right now in the metro area that have this type of event experience. And so GPI really sees this toolkit as a way to increase the number of events happening throughout Minnesota, and a way to scale that up while relying on you guys to develop your own events. So Joe, our colleague here and Green Corps member at GCI, he's going to walk you through the toolkit that we've developed, and we'll take any questions that you have afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. So Great Plains Institute has been involved in planning a lot of these events before, and when we were planning this webinar, we realized that internally we had developed a lot of really good comprehensive tools that we used to put together these events. So we thought, in order to enable the many communities as possible to have these awesome ride and drive experiences, which I'm sure you'll agree sound awesome based on all the examples we've heard of today, we put together a toolkit that does a really good job of walking you through everything you could need to plan your own ride and drive event. So the very first part of the toolkit that you should start with when you access it is this overall event planning checklist. It's a super comprehensive breakdown of every step that you need to take between coming up with the idea of holding one and then actually executing a ride and drive event. It's developed through our own internal process, and we had a lot of help from Midwest Evolve, so thanks to them a lot for helping us just make sure we figured out everything you could think of to plan an event. Like I said, it's step by step. It has everything. It's got a timeline involved, so I think the first steps happen almost 8 weeks out. And it goes all the way up to during the event and some post-event considerations. Something that's important to keep in mind with this toolkit is that we're not necessarily saying do it exactly this way, but it's based on the processes that we have used ourselves that have really been successful in sharing the benefits of electric vehicles through ride and drive events with different communities. So this checklist has a couple of different options. It's got some suggestions and a couple of optional steps that you can take to better fit the event to your community. Finally, it's super easy to print it out, and you can do it that way. You can just check the boxes. I've done that. It's really cool. But also, if you choose to do it online and save it digitally, each one of the tools that is referenced in the checklist also is linked in there. So you can just click on that link, and it'll bring you right to the document that you want. So the first bit of extra tool, the first extra tool to present is these logistics sheets. So we have two different logistics sheets. We have one for EV owners and one for dealerships. There we go. And they are tools that you can use to present and give when you approach EV owners or dealerships that are going to spell out everything that they need to know about their event. It's different for dealerships and EV owners, obviously. They're different based on the specific considerations. I'm glad that Jukka and Phil both talked about how important it is to have maps, because both of these include maps for presenting to dealerships where you want to give them a little bit of a suggested test drive route, and EV owners where you can point a little arrow on a Google Maps screen cap and say, display your vehicles here. So it's got stuff like that. It's everything from when the event is, when they should show up, a few different expectations, what should they expect out of the event. And these tools are really designed to have to, when you approach a dealership, to say, this is what we're expecting from you. This is everything you could possibly want to know about the event. Yeah, so the next tool is dealership outreach guidelines, and Jukka presented a lot of great information about this process here already, and a lot of it is summarized in this document. It's not telling you exactly how to do it, but what it is all the different things that you should keep in mind when you approach a dealership to try to secure vehicles for test drives. Things like making sure that they have one sales representative per vehicle to ride along on the test drive and answer questions. Things like asking what their liability process is like. Do they want to provide a waiver? And also more general concerns about what exactly is expected of them when they show up at the ride and drive event. We also included a sample email that I think has actually been sent by Caitlin to a dealership around here to secure vehicles for a test drive event, so that's super cool. And like I said, just like everything else in the toolkit, this is just a suggestion, but it really does kind of summarize everything that you want to know and consider when approaching a dealership. Yeah, so the next tool is the event worksheet template. This is a pretty simple one. It's just a place where you can keep track of everything happening all at once. It's got places to fill in which vehicles are coming from EV owners to be displayed, which ones are going to be test driven, and a couple of different other logistical concerns. Just kind of a nice way to keep everything straight and on track while you're going through the process. Next up are waivers. So we have provided sample text of a couple of different waivers. We have a detailed one and a less detailed one. And before I continue, I just want to make sure it's clear that this is sample text. Please make your legal team go over it before you provide them. These waivers are designed for the hosting organization to provide to participants in the ride and drive event, just releasing the participant organization from any liability should anything wild go on at the event. It has a photo release in case you want to use photos from your event and any kind of promotional material afterwards. And yeah, like I said, it's sample language, but please review it before you use it. EV owner contact form. Yep, so we have just as a suggested additional step, just a little thing you can send to EV owners that basically says they're not going to do anything brash. It's not a terribly binding legal agreement, but have your team look at it. But it just kind of spells out a little bit more explicitly what is expected from EV owners if they're going to be participating in your event. It's just kind of stuff like, make sure you have a driver's license, you know, please don't be rude to our guests and things like that. Just, you know, something a little bit more explicit that you can use to send to really kind of guarantee that you know what you're going to expect from these EV owners, and just have something in writing that says that they're going to really help make your event as awesome as possible. Next up, sample press release. So we've got a sample press release that's super easy to just drop in different details about your event. You know, you got date, location, place, who's hosting it, things like that. It's ready to go. It's designed for earned media, so it's not quite social media, but for anyone doing a newspaper or something like that, this is a super easy way to promote your event without having to go through the hassle of writing a press release yourself. Like anything, sample language, of course, but it's a pretty good, and it's short, it's concise, it's to the point, it spells out the benefits of EV ownership, why you're doing a ride and drive event, and it's super easily customizable to your event. Next up, social media toolkit. I know Drew and Chris from Rochester talked a lot about how important it is to engage your event through social media, and we've got that for you. So this toolkit walks you through. It also includes more of a timeline style, but it has everything from creating a Facebook event to sending out tweets to sending out Facebook reminders to inviting people to that Facebook event. And it's a comprehensive social media approach developed internally here at Great Plains Institute to make your event as widespread and visible as possible on social media. As with anything, suggestions, but if you follow this guide, your event is going to have a lot of exposure and generate a lot of excitement through social media. These are really cool, actually. So ride and drive sample surveys. What the purpose of these ride and drive sample surveys are is it's a survey to be given before someone test drives a vehicle, after they test drive a vehicle, and then a survey to be given as a follow-up to the event. So maybe a couple weeks, maybe a couple months later. And the really cool thing about these surveys is that the questions that they ask are designed in order to measure change over the course of these, of the test drive. So if someone maybe could end, for example, one of the questions is, where are you exposed to electric vehicles in your community? Well, if someone before test driving the event says that they're not exposed to electric vehicles in their community, and after the test drive they still say the same thing, maybe as a follow-up to the event, because they've been hands-on with an electric vehicle, they'll start to notice them more in their community. And you can see that because these surveys will let you track the change in their answers over the course. It's easily linkable. The same respondent, you can see the change in answers across the 3 surveys. As with anything, again, it's just kind of sample questions and things that we have drafted and provided to you. Feel free to edit it and change it and ask anything you like. But at the end of the day, having concrete, tangible proof of your event's effect on your community is a really great way to influence decision makers and make the case that electric vehicles are here and are very important and are something that your community wants. Next up, as always with anything else, informational handouts. We've provided a whole bunch. Those familiar with City Charging Ahead know that there's so many informational handouts that are out there, and they're great. We just have, I think, 5 to 6 ones that we recommend that I think are really great. They come in a variety of different sort of lengths and messaging details. So there are some that Diana mentioned earlier. You know, it's like a 4-page, very text-heavy but very in-depth document, all the way down to something that has lots of flashy graphics and cool numbers and is a little bit shorter but more pop to it and stuff like that. So pick the ones you want. Feel free to add in, take out, you know, do what you want. But these are some really good ones that we recommend and that I think do a really good job of explaining some of these myths and helping to engage people around EVs at your event. And more. So those are kind of the highlights, but there's a lot of different little small things that you can use in this toolkit that are, like I said, going through that main checklist that are going to make your event planning as smooth as possible. Everything that you could want is prescribed through that checklist. So as you're going through that checklist, it's going to say, now's the time to fill out the event worksheet. Now's the time to do this. Now's the time to do that. And it's linked right there. And if you choose to print it out, it easily points you to where you should find it online. So I didn't present everything that's included in the toolkit, but if you follow the checklist, you're going to be in good shape. Finally, the most exciting part about this toolkit is that it is available right now if you want to go out and plan your own ride and drive event. Maybe you're feeling particularly inspired just because of how awesome this webinar has been. You can get this right now. So if you go on the Drive Electric Minnesota website, there's a tab at the top called Electric Vehicles. Put your mouse over that. The third option down is going to be Ride and Drive Events. Go to that tab, fill out a small form. We just want to know who's using our toolkit, and the toolkit will be automatically emailed to you. You can get it right now, and it'll be instant. It's a combination of Word documents, PDFs, and I think there's maybe one flyer or something in there too. But you can download it right now from the Drive Electric Minnesota website. So if anyone has any questions about the toolkit, feel free.
All right, so it looks like we have one question, and any panelist can answer this from Alexis at CERT. Is the owner of the vehicle always with their vehicle, or are attendees allowed to drive off in their vehicle on the test drive route without the owner? How do owners feel about the liability of their car during a ride and drive event? Looks like you go on to take this one.
Well, I would just remind that my approach and what we have done with the EV owners is that we don't recommend EV owners themselves doing the ride and drive portion of the thing, but doing the static display. So that the owners are providing the cars for the static display. They are by their cars talking with people about their cars, about their experiences, and the ride and drive is done with the other dealers. That way, it's much cleaner, much easier. For everyone, if that's possible in any shape or form. One thing that I would also want to mention here is that consider in your events, when do you want to do just an EV display and when do you want to include the ride and drive? You can make a great event just by having an EV display. You don't necessarily have to try to do the ride and drive part, especially if you have a hard time working with the other dealers in your area. They don't carry too many. There's no shame in just doing the EV display part. That's what we do in most of our events, and those are very, very impactful just by themselves.
All right, are there any other questions for any of the panelists or about the toolkit? And you can either raise your hand if you want to ask it verbally, or submit your question through the Q&A form or through chat. I'm sure you'll all think of a lot of great questions after the webinar is done. All right, well, seeing none, Diana, do you have any concluding remarks that you would like to add? And I think you should still be available to talk.
I am. Greetings from DC. I don't think so. We do have a webinar that we're planning for June. I can't remember the topic right now, but something fabulous, I'm sure. Oh, I know. I think we wanted to go over some of the toolkit information. So we'll see, but we're planning that, and that will be the last official webinar. Although I believe that we'll be having some webinars ongoing here and there as topics come up and are important. But I think the other thing I want to share with folks is that we are diligently working on getting a communities charging ahead page on the Drive Electric Minnesota website that will have all of the tools and resources and guides from our experience over the past 16 months with cities charging ahead. So we're working really hard to get all that information and all our learning in one place so that you'll have access to that. I think that's all I have.
Awesome. Looks like Lisa might have another question. Lisa, I think you can go ahead.
Oh, super. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I confess this is a little gratuitous, but I'm thinking of doing a ride and drive in Mendota Heights, and if anybody is interested in that, feel free to contact me. Thank you.
Perfect, thanks, Lise. All right, well, oh, okay, Anne has a question. Oh. Okay, Anne, I think you can go ahead. Anne, we're not hearing you. I don't know if you need to unmute your phone. Otherwise, the chat is also available for you to submit your question. All right, we received your thank you. Okay, so I'm not seeing any more questions, so I think we're going to go ahead and adjourn. Thank you to all of our panelists. It was a great webinar. If anyone has any follow-up questions, you can direct them to me or another GPI staff, and we can either answer them or send them out to our panelists as well. And we will be getting the recorded version of the webinar ready that you can send out to anyone that missed the webinar as well. And we'll have slides available from today as well. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.